Welcome to Bedtime Sleep Stories for Grown-Ups by Beezy Honey.net. I hope you are settled in for the night and are ready to go on a journey of deep and relaxing sleep. We've put these special bedtime sleep stories for adults for anyone out there dealing with insomnia, sleep problems, sleep deprivation, anxiety, pain, or any other kind of issues preventing you from getting enough sleep and being fully rested and ready to take on the day. We truly hope these stories can help you achieve the elusive, deep, and uninterrupted sleep. Please enjoy this episode and consider subscribing to our channel to support and help the spread of these sleep stories to people all over the world with the same issues that brought you to this video. Thank you for your support and a deep and uninterrupted sleep to you tonight. Let's begin. As the sun rose on a new day in the gray waste, the group found themselves in quiet contemplation of their recent victory over the Titan. It was a poignant moment, a realization that their actions held consequences, both grand and minuscule, in this strange and savage land. Their elation from the battle had dimmed somewhat, replaced by a somber understanding of the price of their success. Despite the grim thoughts, they had a mission to complete. After a quick breakfast, they continued their journey deeper into the waste. The landscape began to change, the barren gray giving way to vast plains of scorched earth. Cracks ran deep into the ground, and fissures spewed hot steam, giving the air a sulfuric tinge. It was as if they had reached the heart of the waste itself. Roshan scanned the area with a critical eye. "This region is highly unstable," he warned. "We need to watch our steps and avoid any sudden movements. A wrong move could trigger a quake, or worse." The others nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Each step became measured, deliberate. They moved as one, their earlier triumph bonding them in ways they hadn't realized. The newfound unity was a small comfort amidst the harsh terrain. Zara, using her sharpshooter's eye, took the lead. Her every sense was on high alert as she navigated the cracked plains, guiding her team around the most perilous zones. As they trekked, the heat became more intense, the steam from the fissures curling around them in a ghostly shroud. As they neared what seemed to be the epicenter of the volatile region, they spotted something odd in the distance. Amidst the billowing steam, there was a distinct glow, a pulsating light that seemed completely out of place in the monochrome landscape. "What is that?" Lena squinted, trying to get a better look. The group paused, all eyes on the anomalous glow. There was an eerie beauty to it, a beacon of light in the midst of desolation, but there was also something unsettling about it, a deep, instinctual wariness. "We need to investigate," Callum decided, his voice holding an edge of uncertainty. "But be prepared for anything. There's no telling what we might find." With a collective nod, they moved towards the light, their hearts heavy with anticipation. As they approached, the glow intensified, a brilliant radiance that bathed the scorched earth in an ethereal glow. It was then they realized the source of the light was not a thing, but a creature unlike anything they had ever seen in the waste. With a body that pulsed with bioluminescence, it was a beacon of life amidst the lifeless landscape. However, as they neared the creature, something happened. It turned its gaze towards them, and its eyes held an intelligence that sent a chill down their spines. Suddenly, the ground beneath them started to quake, steam hissing violently from the fissures around them. The creature had reacted, and it seemed their intrusion was not welcome. With the ground shaking violently beneath their feet, panic surged through the group. The vibrant creature, once a spectacle of beauty, had become a harbinger of danger. Their initial fascination gave way to dread as the seismic activity intensified. "Everyone, retreat!" Roshan shouted over the din, his voice barely audible against the rumbling earth and hissing steam. The group scrambled back, trying to distance themselves from the creature, but the tremors grew stronger, the fissures widening and splitting the earth further. It was as if they were caught in the beast's power, a gravitational pull they couldn't escape. Zara, the most agile among them, moved with a speed born of desperation. She reached the edge of the trembling ground first, turning to watch as her companions struggled to keep their balance. She extended her hand towards Lena, pulling the scientist back from a yawning fissure. With Lena safe, Zara turned her attention to Roshan and Callum, who were closer to the creature. They were having difficulty moving away, the Earth's convulsions stronger near the bioluminescent entity. Each step they took was met with a stronger pushback. In a split-second decision, Zara aimed her weapon at the ground near the creature. She wasn't sure what she hoped to achieve, but her instincts told her she had to do something. She fired, the explosive shell hitting the ground and creating a large crater, diverting some of the creature's attention and releasing a cloud of dust and steam. "Run!" she screamed to Roshan and Callum, who seized the opportunity and sprinted towards her. As the dust settled, the tremors lessened. The creature, once again calm, resumed its gentle glow. The ground around it, now scarred by Zara's explosion, began to heal, the cracks slowly closing as if guided by the creature's will. A silence fell over the group as they took in the sight. The creature had the power to control, maybe even create, the landscape of the waste. This revelation sent a shiver through them. If provoked, could it trigger a cataclysm powerful enough to level their home base? It was a thought too daunting to contemplate. Yet it left them with an invaluable lesson. The waste, for all its barren harshness, held within it a strange and powerful form of life. It was a reminder that respect for life in all its forms was crucial. One wrong step, one misplaced sense of superiority, and they could invoke a wrath they were ill prepared for. The thought remained with them as they slowly backed away, leaving the creature and its domain undisturbed. They had intruded, and they had paid the price, but they had also learned a lesson, one that would guide their actions as they journeyed further into the heart of the waste. The torches of the grand banquet hall, ensconced within the wandering castle, flickered dimly. A fire in the massive hearth bathed the assembled multitude in a warm, soft light. A silence of anticipation hovered over the gathering, and all eyes were fixed on the high table where Regan sat, staring into the flames. The banquet had ended, and the celebrations had ceased. This was the time for the true matter of the gathering, the discussions and the planning, the strategies and the tactics. As queen, it was her duty to lead, but she found herself lost in thought, mulling over the implications of everything she had learnt. "Your Highness?" A voice finally broke through her reverie. It was Alaric, the captain of her royal guards. His stern face bore a look of concern. "We need your guidance." Regan nodded, clearing her throat as she stood, raising her glass for a toast. The chatter died down instantly, every pair of eyes in the room now focused on her. "Friends, countrymen, allies, we have a mission ahead of us. A mission, I dare say, that is as perilous as it is crucial for our very survival." Her voice echoed throughout the grand hall, her words slowly etching themselves into the hearts of those present. A mission of survival, a fight against an unknown enemy. But despite the weight of their situation, a sense of determination filled the room. These were people who were ready to fight for their land, their homes, and their people. But how were they to fight an enemy that could not be seen, an enemy that seemed almost omnipotent? Regan's mind circled back to the prophecy, to the intricate web of threads and the gossamer weaver. Are we simply pawns in the weaver's grand scheme? She wondered aloud. The room remained silent, the only sound being the crackling of the fire. This was a crucial question. It was easy to be swayed by prophecies and destiny, but what if they were being manipulated? What if the gossamer weaver was not a savior, but instead a master puppeteer controlling their every move? As Regan posed this question to the room, many of those gathered shifted uncomfortably, their gazes flicking between each other. Even Alaric, usually unflappable, looked pensive. It was a question that weighed heavy on everyone's mind, but nobody had dared to voice it out loud. A question that demanded an answer. Taking a deep breath, Regan continued, "But we cannot afford to be paralyzed by doubt. Whether the gossamer weaver is friend or foe, we must be prepared for all outcomes. We must weave our own destiny." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Regan's words, rather than sparking fear or uncertainty, ignited a spark of hope. Yes, they were not mere pawns. They were not helpless in the face of destiny. They had the power to shape their own path, to fight for their own future. They were not just waiting for the prophecy to unfold. They were part of the story. "So," Regan said, her voice steady, "let us plan. Let us prepare. Let us show this gossamer weaver that we are not merely threads in their tapestry, but the weavers of our own destiny." The response was immediate. The room erupted into cheers, the palpable fear and apprehension replaced with determination and resolve. They were ready to fight, ready to face whatever lay ahead. and as the cheers echoed around her, Reagan knew that they were not just fighting for their lives, they were fighting for their freedom to choose, their freedom to shape their own destiny, their freedom to rise above the chains of prophecies and the strings of puppeteers. Yet, as the echoes of their cheers slowly died down, a sense of unease lingered. The questions about the Gossamer Weaver remained unanswered. As Reagan looked into the flames once more, she realized their fight was just beginning. In the days that followed, the members of the guild worked tirelessly to prepare themselves for the unknown. They trained their bodies, honed their skills, and studied the ancient texts. Every scrap of information about the Gossamer Weaver was scrutinized, every legend analyzed, every theory debated. But it was not just physical preparation that occupied their time. They also worked on their mental fortitude, understanding that fear and doubt were as potent enemies as any they might face. They held discussions, shared their fears and hopes, and supported each other. They became not just allies, but a family. One evening, as they gathered around the fire, Cale, the oldest among them, began to speak. His voice, seasoned with age and wisdom, commanded attention. He told them stories of the past, of heroes and villains, of victories and defeats. But most importantly, he spoke of hope. Hope, he said, his voice echoing in the silence, is a powerful thing. It is the light that guides us through the darkest nights. It is the flame that warms us in the coldest winters. It is the thread that binds us together even when we are apart. Hope is what makes us human. Hope is what makes us strong. His words touched their hearts, reigniting the spark of hope that Reagan had kindled. They were not alone. They were not helpless. They were strong, brave, and above all, they had hope. As the night deepened, one by one, they shared their own stories, their fears, their dreams, their hopes. They laughed, they cried, they comforted each other, they drew strength from each other, and as the first light of dawn began to creep into the sky, they knew they were ready to face whatever the future held, ready to meet the Gossamer Weaver. They were no longer the puppet, they were the puppeteer. They were ready to weave their own destiny. But as the sun rose, casting long shadows over the guild, a sense of foreboding filled the air, an ominous feeling that something was coming, something big, something that could change their lives forever. Little did they know that their lives were about to take a turn that none of them had anticipated. The morning was a flurry of activity as the guild began preparing for the day ahead. Weapons were checked and double-checked, rations were packed, and maps were scrutinized one final time. As the last of the preparations were being made, a strange wind blew through the guild, rustling the leaves and carrying an eerie chill. Suddenly the ground beneath them began to shake. It started as a gentle rumble, barely noticeable, but soon grew into a full-fledged earthquake. The members of the guild scrambled to keep their balance as the ground beneath them shifted and cracked. Then, as abruptly as it had started, the shaking stopped. But the sense of dread that had filled the air remained. They looked at each other in silence, their faces a mask of fear and confusion. In the silence that followed, a sound echoed through the guild, a low, droning hum, growing louder and more insistent with each passing second. It was a sound they had never heard before, a sound that sent chills down their spines. Without warning, the ground in the middle of the guild's square began to crack, a deep fissure spreading outwards like a spider web. Then, with a deafening roar, something erupted from the ground, sending chunks of earth flying. There, in the middle of the guild, stood a creature like none they had ever seen before. It was enormous, towering over them, its body covered in glistening scales that reflected the sunlight. Its eyes were a deep, piercing red, and it had a set of wings that seemed too large to be real. It was the Gossamer Weaver. The guild members stood in stunned silence, their training forgotten in the face of such an overwhelming sight. Fear gripped them, their bodies frozen, their minds reeling. The Gossamer Weaver let out a roar, the sound echoing off the surrounding buildings. Then, spreading its wings, it took to the sky, its massive form casting a shadow over the guild. As they watched it disappear into the sky, the reality of their situation set in. They were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted. The initial shock wore off, replaced by a flurry of activity as guild members dashed to collect themselves. The creature had come and gone, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake, but it had also left them with a vital lesson. Master Grovewalker had always insisted that any creature, no matter how fearsome, had weaknesses. Nature, he would say, is a grand symphony of balance. Each creature, each element, each force has a counter. This was the Guild's opportunity to prove the truth in these words. They began by studying the creature's trail, the destruction it had left in its wake. Even in its brief visit, it had changed the landscape, leaving an enormous crater where once stood the heart of the Guild. Studying the ground, the Guild's expert trackers could discern the direction it had flown off towards. A team was quickly assembled, made up of the Guild's best warriors, mages, and trackers. They knew this was a dangerous mission, but they were ready to risk everything for their Guild, their home. They bid farewell to their comrades, promising to return victorious or not at all. As they set off, leaving behind the familiarity and relative safety of their Guild, they were filled with a mixture of fear and determination. But it was more than that. They felt a sense of purpose. They were the last line of defense, not just for the Guild, but for humanity. The profound lesson they had learned from this disaster was resilience. Despite being taken by surprise, despite the fear and confusion, they had rallied together. They had turned a moment of panic into a moment of action. Master Grovewalker's teachings rang true. In nature, each creature, each element, each force indeed had a counter. And it wasn't always about being the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes it was about being the most resilient, the most adaptable. So even though they were facing a creature unlike anything they had seen before, they had hope. For in the grand symphony of balance, they were the counterforce to the Gossamer Weaver. And with this thought in mind, they ventured into the unknown. The landscape changed dramatically as they ventured further from the Guild's territory. The lush green forests gave way to barren wasteland, the soil charred and lifeless. The Gossamer Weaver had done this, leaving a trail of desolation wherever it flew. Despite the grim setting, the team pressed on. They traveled for days, tracking the creature's path by the swath of destruction it left behind. Every day they woke up to the same stark, barren landscape, pushing them to question their resolve. One evening as they set up camp, the air became tense. The warriors drew their weapons instinctively, eyes scanning the lifeless horizon. It was the mages who sensed it first, a powerful magic seeping into their world from another realm. It was coming. With no time to prepare, they readied themselves for battle. The warriors stood at the front, weapons at the ready. The mages, positioned safely behind, began to chant, pooling their energies for a collective spell. The trackers, armed with their long-ranged weapons, took positions atop nearby rocks, providing an aerial vantage. Then, like a storm sweeping over the horizon, the Gossamer Weaver emerged. Its massive form cast a shadow over the team, its many eyes glowing eerily in the twilight. The ground beneath them shook as it landed, sending clouds of dust into the air. The creature was even more terrifying up close, an embodiment of the Guild's greatest fears. But in the face of fear, they did not falter. The warriors charged, brandishing their weapons, each attack a display of courage and strength. The mages released their collective spell, a brilliant array of light that met the creature with a thunderous clash. Yet, for all their courage and power, they were barely making a dent. The creature was resilient, its outer shell impervious to their attacks. Each retaliation from the Gossamer Weaver sent the Guild members flying, their bodies colliding hard against the rocky terrain. Despite their efforts, the creature seemed unbeatable. They could feel their strength and hope dwindling with each passing moment. Just when they were on the brink of giving up, an unexpected voice echoed through their minds. It was Master Grovewalker. His voice filled them with a sense of calm, of reassurance. He reminded them of their training, their bonds, their duty. Remember, he told them, the real battle is not fought with weapons or magic, but within ourselves. He reminded them about the power of resilience, of never giving up, even in the face of the most terrifying adversary. His words reverberated through their minds as they picked themselves up, dusted off their clothes, and readied themselves for another round. This time, they were not just fighting the creature, but their own fears and doubts. As they stood in front of the Gossamer Weaver, weapons drawn, magic pulsating in the air, they knew that the battle had just begun. It was not going to be easy, and the odds were against them. But they were not going to back down, not until they had given their all. As the group steeled themselves, a sudden sense of unity and resolve filled the air. This unity was reflected in the glint in their eyes, the firmness of their grip on their weapons, the cadence of their heartbeats. Each member of the guild was committed to this fight, dedicated to their mission, to each other, and to the safety of their world. One by one, they took their place on the battlefield, forming a line against the monstrous entity. Their expressions, grim and determined, echoed the seriousness of their intent. From the warriors at the front line to the mages at the back, everyone stood ready, knowing that this could be their last stand. Taking a deep breath, the guild members surged forward. The mages started casting their spells, drawing on the magic within and around them to form a protective barrier around the warriors. The warriors, in turn, engaged the gossamer weaver, their weapons clashing against its hard exterior with a resounding clash. The battle was fierce and relentless. The guild members pushed back against the creature with all their might, their attacks growing stronger and more focused with every passing second. However, the gossamer weaver was not an enemy to be taken lightly. It retaliated with equal vigor, its massive claws swiping through the air and its magical energies erupting in waves of destructive power. During the battle, the guild members remembered the wisdom Master Grovewalker had imparted to them. They remembered their training, their strategies, their strengths, and their weaknesses. Most importantly, they remembered their purpose and the promise they made to protect their world from the gossamer weaver. In the heat of battle, they discovered new depths of courage and strength within themselves. Their resilience was tested time and again, yet they held their ground, undeterred by the monumental challenge in front of them. As the battle raged on, the mages began to tap into a deeper source of magic, a reservoir of power that they had been unaware of until now. It was a raw, primal energy, resonating with the very essence of their world. The realization of this untapped power filled them with a newfound hope and resolve. They channeled this energy into their spells, augmenting their attacks and strengthening their defenses. This sudden surge of power turned the tide of the battle. Their attacks began to make an impact, piercing through the gossamer weaver's defenses, pushing it back. The creature roared in defiance and pain, its attacks becoming more frantic and desperate. As they continued to push back, a glimmer of hope ignited within the guild members. The gossamer weaver was retreating, faltering under the force of their unified assault. This was their chance. The mages poured every ounce of their newfound power into a single combined spell. It was a spell of sealing, designed to trap the creature and render it powerless. The warriors provided a distraction, attacking the creature with renewed vigor. But just as the mages were about to cast their spell, a blinding light enveloped the battlefield. The gossamer weaver had launched a desperate counterattack. This time, the attack was not aimed at the warriors, but at the mages, who were caught off guard. As the light faded, the mages found themselves thrown back, their spell disrupted. The warriors, in their desperate attempt to protect the mages, had been caught in the blast as well. A deafening silence filled the air as dust and smoke settled on the battlefield. When the dust cleared, the gossamer weaver was gone, and in its place, a gaping portal stood, pulsating with the same eerie light that had come from the creature. The aftermath of the blast was grim. Members of the guild lay scattered on the ground, some struggling to their feet, others too dazed or injured to move. The ground was scorched and marred by the power of the gossamer weaver's last attack. In the midst of the devastation stood the pulsating portal, a stark contrast to the calm stillness of the forest around them. "Is everyone all right?" The voice belonged to Sabrina, the mage. Her voice wavered slightly, but it carried a note of determination. The guild members, hearing the concern in her voice, forced themselves to their feet, their wounds protesting with every movement. "We're okay, Sabrina," responded Damon the warrior. He was clutching his side, where a wound was seeping, but his eyes were on the portal. "But what about that?" All eyes turned towards the portal. It was unlike anything they had seen before. It shimmered with an ethereal glow, pulsating in a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. The air around it hummed with an otherworldly energy that sent a chill down their spines. Master Grovewalker, the eldest and wisest of the guild, walked towards the portal, his old eyes squinting at the spectacle. "This," he muttered, "this is a gateway to another realm. The gossamer weaver has retreated to its own domain." A ripple of fear ran through the guild. The prospect of venturing into an unknown realm was daunting. The fear was palpable, yet there was also a sense of resolve. They knew they couldn't back down now. "We have to follow it," said Sabrina, her voice steady. "We cannot let it recover and strike again." There was a murmur of agreement among the guild members. They knew the dangers, the uncertainties, but they also knew their duty, their responsibility. They had pledged to protect their world, and they would see it through, no matter the cost. So they prepared, each in their own way. The warriors tended to their wounds, their hands steady despite the pain. The mages gathered their energies, focusing their minds on the task ahead. Each of them, regardless of their roles and capabilities, knew they had a part to play in this. Despite the looming uncertainty and the imminent danger, the guild members found a sense of peace in their preparation. They had faced many trials before, and each had left its mark on them, shaping them into who they were today. This trial was just another part of their journey, a chapter in their story. As they gathered at the mouth of the portal, a thought occurred to them. This was a testament to their resilience, their courage, their unwavering spirit. The fight against the Gossamer Weaver was not just a battle for their world, but a battle for themselves. It was a struggle to uphold their values, their principles, their identities. They looked at each other, their eyes speaking volumes. Each of them carried their own burdens, their own fears, their own hopes. But in that moment, they were not alone. They were a part of something bigger, something that transcended their individual selves. Standing at the threshold of the unknown, they realized a profound truth. Fear was not a weakness. It was a part of being human, but so was hope. And as long as they held on to their hope, they could face any fear. After all, courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. With that lesson imprinted on their hearts, they took a step towards the portal, ready to face whatever awaited them on the other side. And just as the first of them was about to step through the portal, a sudden rush of energy erupted from the gateway. It was as if the portal itself was reacting to their presence, resonating with their courage and determination. The energy flowed around them, its pulsating rhythm now more intense, more urgent. But instead of fear, the guild members felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the point of no return. As the energy swirled around them, they felt an inexplicable sense of belonging, as if the energy recognized them, recognized their resolve, their determination, their courage. Then the energy began to change. It started to form shapes, images, visions. They were disjointed, fleeting, like fragments of a dream. Images of forests, rivers, mountains, skies, scenes of incredible beauty. Yet each image carried a sense of foreboding, a sense of danger. The visions became more intense, more vivid. They could feel the breeze on their faces, hear the rustling of leaves, see the sunlight filtering through the trees. And then they saw it, the Gossamer Weaver. It was in its realm, recovering, gathering its power for another assault. A collective gasp ran through the guild members. They had been right. They couldn't afford to wait, to delay. The Gossamer Weaver was a threat to their world, and they were the only ones who could stop it. With a shared glance, they stepped into the portal, leaving their realm behind. They did not know what awaited them, what challenges they would face, or even if they would return. But they knew one thing for certain. They were ready to fight. As they stepped through, the energy of the portal enveloped them, its pulsating rhythm now a part of them. They could feel their own energies resonating with it, as if they were in harmony with the energy of the portal. And then everything went dark. A moment later, their eyes adjusted to the darkness, and they found themselves in the realm of the Gossamer Weaver. It was eerily beautiful, with an alien, haunting quality. The sky was a swirling mix of colors they had never seen before, and the landscape was filled with strange, exotic plants and creatures. They stood there for a moment, taking in their surroundings, their senses overwhelmed by the sights, the sounds, the scents. But they couldn't afford to be distracted. They were in enemy territory, and they had a mission to accomplish. They began their journey, their steps echoing in the quiet landscape. The further they ventured into the realm, the more alien it felt. But despite the strangeness, there was a sense of order, of balance. It was as if the realm itself was a reflection of the Gossamer Weaver, beautiful but dangerous. As they journeyed, they felt a profound connection with their surroundings. They realized that the Gossamer Weaver's realm was not just a battleground, but a living, breathing entity. It was a testament to the power of nature, to the resilience of life, to the beauty of existence. And in that realization, they found a new resolve. They were not just fighting for their world, but for all worlds, for all realms. They were fighting for life, for existence, for balance. As they prepared for the battle ahead, they knew they carried a profound responsibility. They were not just warriors or mages. They were guardians, protectors, saviors. They carried the hopes of their world, the dreams of their people, the future of their realm. They looked at each other, their hearts heavy with the weight of their responsibility, their eyes shining with the resolve to fulfill their duty. They were ready to face the Gossamer Weaver, ready to do whatever it took to safeguard their world. As they moved deeper into the foreign landscape, they started to feel a powerful presence. It was an energy unlike anything they had encountered before, raw and unbridled. It was the Gossamer Weaver. Drawing closer, they could see the creature in the distance. It was larger than they remembered, its form shimmering with the same ethereal glow they had seen in the portal. It was a mesmerizing and terrifying sight. Its power was palpable, radiating in waves that sent shivers down their spines. They took a moment to regroup, their hearts pounding in their chests. They looked at each other, each pair of eyes echoing the same sentiment. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the moment they had journeyed so far for. "Remember," Master Grovewalker's voice rang out, steady and firm, "we are the Guild. We stand together. We fight together for our world." His words echoed in the air, a potent reminder of their bond, their unity. They were more than just a group of warriors and mages. They were a team, a family, and together they were unstoppable. With renewed resolve they advanced, their weapons ready, their energies focused. The Gossamer Weaver sensed their approach and turned its attention towards them. A low growl resonated through the air, a clear warning of the battle to come. As they faced the creature, the guild members felt a strange sense of calm. They knew the odds were against them, that the battle would be challenging, but they also knew they had each other. They had faced trials together, overcome hurdles together. This was just another challenge they would face together. The battle began with a clash of energies, the guild's unified power against the raw might of the Gossamer Weaver. The air vibrated with the force of their attacks, each strike a testament to their resolve, their courage, their unity. Despite the intensity of the battle, the guild members found themselves in a state of heightened awareness, their senses attuned to each other's movements, their strategies aligning seamlessly. It was as if they were a single entity, their individual strengths woven together to form a formidable force. As they fought, they began to understand the true essence of their bond. They were not just a team, they were a community. Each of them had a role to play, a contribution to make, and together they were greater than the sum of their parts. The battle raged on, the guild members pushing their limits, unleashing their full potential. With every attack, every defense they learned, they grew, they evolved. They understood that growth was not just about individual strength, but about collective strength. It was about lifting each other up, about standing together, about unity. And in that profound realization, they found their strength multiplied. Their attacks became more powerful, their defenses more resilient. They were a force to be reckoned with. But just as they were gaining the upper hand, the Gossamer Weaver unleashed a massive wave of energy. It was a desperate, reckless attack, one that could spell disaster for the guild. As the wave of energy hurtled towards them, they braced themselves, but before they could react, a blinding light enveloped them. They were enveloped in a blinding light. Everything around them seemed to dissolve into an expanse of pure radiance. Time felt like it had stopped, and they felt a strange sense of calm washing over them. Then they felt it. A pull, an attraction. It was as if they were being drawn somewhere. It was not a physical pull, but rather an instinctual one. A voice inside them was guiding them somewhere. Somewhere they were needed. Somewhere they belonged. Slowly, they began to move towards the source of the pull. As they got closer, the light around them began to dim, replaced by the comforting darkness of familiarity. They could see shapes emerging in the distance, growing clearer with each passing moment. They could see it now. Their world. Their home. It was just as they had left it, yet it seemed different. They felt a strange sense of connection with it, a sense of belonging they had never felt before. They felt like they were part of it, part of its life, part of its soul. The moment they stepped into their world, they felt a wave of energy washing over them. It was a familiar energy, one they had felt many times before. It was the energy of the guild, the energy of unity, the energy of togetherness. They looked around. Their comrades were there, waiting for them. They were no longer warriors or mages. They were family. Their journey had brought them closer, bound them together in ways they had never imagined. They were stronger, not because of their individual strengths, but because of their unity. Master Grovewalker's voice echoed in their minds. We are the guild. We stand together. We fight together for our world. The profoundness of his words hit them. They had come a long way, faced many trials, but they had never faltered, never given up, because they had each other, because they were a team, a family. They had learned a lot on their journey. They had learned about their strengths and weaknesses. They had learned about trust and cooperation. But most importantly, they had learned about unity. Unity was their strength. Unity was their power. It was what had brought them this far. It was what had helped them face the challenges of their journey. And it was what would help them face the challenges that lay ahead. But as they basked in the glow of their unity, they felt a strange sense of foreboding. There was something in the air, something that felt wrong, something that felt out of place. Suddenly, they heard a scream of pain, a scream of terror. They turned around to see one of their own, a young mage, lying on the ground, clutching his chest. As they rushed to his side, they saw the source of his pain, a wound, a deep, festering wound, a wound that was not of this world, a wound that could only be caused by one thing, the gossamer weaver. It was a sight that sent a chill down their spines. The wound was deep, filled with a pulsating darkness that seemed to suck in all light around it. The mage's skin around the wound had turned a sickly green, an unnatural color that stood in stark contrast to his pale complexion. "What happened?" asked Seraph, the guild's main healer, rushing to the fallen mage's side. I don't know," the mage stammered, pain evident in his voice. I was fine. And then it just appeared." "Stand back," Seraph ordered, her hands already glowing with healing energy. She pressed them onto the wound, and a brilliant light enveloped the mage. But instead of the usual soothing light that accompanied Seraph's healing, a harsh, unyielding light shone. It was a light that held no warmth, a light that seemed to consume everything in its path. The light and the darkness of the wound clashed, creating a blinding flash. When the light finally subsided, they looked down at their friend, lying still on the ground. Seraph was panting heavily, sweat beading on her forehead. I don't understand," she murmured, disbelief etching her face. "My healing. It did nothing." The realization hit them like a punch in the gut. This was beyond them. The gossamer weaver had struck again, leaving them with another obstacle they couldn't overcome. But they couldn't afford to give up. They couldn't afford to lose another one of their own. "We need to find help," Master Grovewalker said, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. "We cannot fight this on our own." As they gathered their wounded friend, the looming threat of the gossamer weaver hung over them like a dark cloud. This was a battle they couldn't fight with just their strength. They needed help. They needed more than just their unity. And so they set out, their journey taking a new turn. They were no longer just adventurers seeking to save their world. They were now also on a quest to save one of their own. Through this unexpected twist, they realized that unity was not just about fighting together. It was about standing together, even in the face of unknown threats. It was about supporting each other, even when things seemed hopeless. But the question remained, where would they find the help they needed? Who could they turn to, and would they find them in time? As they ventured forth, they couldn't shake off the feeling that time was running out. But they would not give up. They would stand together, fight together, and they would save their friend. The group of adventurers moved quickly through the labyrinthine corridors of the legendary Varenthian library, said to hold the knowledge of 1,000 worlds. Seraph, still shaken from her failed healing attempt, clutched their injured friend tighter. His life was in the balance, but they were far from helpless. They reached the grand atrium, a magnificent sight with towering bookshelves that seemed to touch the heavens. Ancient, leather-bound books filled every inch of space, their spines glowing with the magic imbued within their pages. At the center of the atrium, A grand marble statue of Thoth, the god of knowledge, stood guard. "Who are we looking for?" Seraph asked, her voice echoing throughout the vast space. "An oracle," Master Grovewalker said, his gaze scanning the towering bookshelves. "They say she has access to knowledge from all the realms, knowledge that might help us understand what we're dealing with." They made their way through rows of books, climbing spiraling staircases and crossing high bridges that connected the numerous levels of the library. Finally, in the heart of the library, they found the oracle. She was old, her back hunched, and her hair a striking white. But her eyes held a piercing gaze that belied her frail exterior. She was surrounded by books and scrolls, their pages open and filled with intricate diagrams and runes. Master Grovewalker stepped forward, bowing deeply in respect. "Great Oracle, we seek your help," he said, gesturing to their wounded friend. "Our friend has been afflicted with a darkness we don't understand. We seek your wisdom." The oracle studied them, her gaze sharp and intense. Then she extended a frail hand towards their friend, her fingers hovering over the dark wound. "A dangerous path you tread," she murmured, her eyes never leaving the wound. "But fear not, for every question has an answer, if you know where to look." The oracle's words hit them with a profound realization. While unity was their strength, knowledge was their shield. They had stepped into the battle with the Gossamer Weaver unprepared, without the necessary knowledge. It was a mistake they could not afford to repeat. For the remainder of the day, the oracle shared her knowledge with them, flipping through ancient tomes and scribbling complex runes on parchment. She taught them about the Gossamer Weaver's history and the curse that had claimed many lives centuries ago. Her words painted a grim picture, but they also kindled a glimmer of hope. "To break the curse," the oracle said, her gaze intense, "you must confront the Weaver in its own realm, the dreaming abyss. It is a perilous journey. Many have attempted it, but few have returned." "But how do we enter the dreaming abyss?" asked Seraph, her hand clenching on the worn edge of an ancient book. "The passage is opened through the Dreamweaver's amulet. It is an ancient artifact that allows one to traverse between realms. However, the amulet has been lost to time." Her words hung in the air, the weight of their quest now truly sinking in. Retrieving the Dreamweaver's amulet and confronting the Weaver in its realm was a daunting task, but they had no other choice. Their friend's life was on the line. Master Grovewalker, resolute, stood up. "Then we will find the amulet, enter the dreaming abyss, and confront the Weaver. We will do what needs to be done." The oracle nodded, a faint smile on her face. "The path is dangerous, but you do not walk it alone. Remember, unity is your strength, and now knowledge is your shield. Use them wisely." As they prepared to leave, the oracle handed them a sealed scroll. This scroll contains a prophecy. It is said to contain clues to the location of the Dreamweaver's amulet. Guard it well. The adventurers thanked the oracle for her help and set off, their hearts heavy but filled with determination. As they stepped out into the chilly night, they knew their quest was just beginning. And even though the path was fraught with danger, they took comfort in the oracle's words. They were not alone. Yet, as the library's massive doors closed behind them, a shadowy figure emerged from the shadows. His eyes were cold, his gaze locked on the scroll in Master Grovewalker's hands. An ominous smile spread across his face as he disappeared into the night, leaving the adventurers none the wiser. The journey ahead was not only dangerous, it was also a race against unseen enemies. Will they retrieve the Dreamweaver's amulet before it falls into the wrong hands? Only time would tell. The adventurers spent the night at the local inn, their minds filled with thoughts of the task ahead. The oracle's words echoed in their heads, the gravity of their quest slowly sinking in. They needed to find the Dreamweaver's amulet, a seemingly impossible task, and then confront the Weaver in the dreaming abyss. It was daunting, but they were resolute. Early the next morning, they gathered in the common room of the inn, the sealed scroll from the oracle spread on the table before them. They glanced at each other, then Master Grovewalker broke the seal and unrolled the scroll. His eyes scanned the faded parchment, then he sighed. "It's a riddle," he said, pushing the scroll towards the others. They gathered around, reading the cryptic words etched in elegant script. "In the shadow of the stone giant, where the sun never sleeps, lies the amulet. Beneath the sightless eye it waits to be claimed. Beware, for the path is guarded by the sleeping serpent. Only with light can darkness be vanquished." The adventurers stared at the scroll in silence, the riddle seeming as inscrutable as the quest they had been given. Then Seraph frowned, her fingers tracing the words on the parchment. The stone giant, the sightless eye, the sleeping serpent. These could be landmarks, and the sun never sleeps could mean a place where the sun is always visible, she mused. Their minds raced, turning the words of the prophecy over and over, trying to decipher their meaning. It was like piecing together a complex puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit, but they persevered, each clue bringing them a step closer to the Dreamweaver's amulet. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to them, the shadowy figure lurked in the shadows, listening to their discussion. His eyes narrowed, a sinister smirk playing on his lips. The race was on, and he had no intention of losing. Grovewalker ran his fingers through his beard, lost in thought. His mind was a whirlwind of ideas and conjectures, each more convoluted than the last. "In my travels," he began slowly, his voice laced with uncertainty, "I have come across tales of a monolith in the far north, where the sun never sets in the summer months. They call it the Sleeping Stone Giant." The others turned to him, interest sparking in their eyes. "That sounds promising," Seraph said, a glint of hope in her voice. "But we have no time to travel to the north and back," interjected Kai, ever the realist. "The Dreamweaver grows stronger each day. We can't afford any delays." Grovewalker nodded, understanding the gravity of their predicament. "We must find a faster way." In the midst of their desperate brainstorming, an idea sparked in Orion's mind. The old maps in the Oracle's library. He remembered seeing ancient charts and scrolls containing detailed descriptions of mystical places. Could the answer to their riddle lie in those old parchments? "We should return to the Oracle," Orion suggested, his eyes gleaming with resolve. "Her library might hold the answer." No sooner than he had finished his sentence, a gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candles. They could hear the soft whispers of the wind as it whistled through the cracks of the inn. An eerie sense of foreboding washed over them. A sudden chill made Seraph's skin prickle, and a shiver ran down her spine. She cast a wary glance around the dimly lit room. "Something's not right," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Then, just as suddenly as it had extinguished, the candles flickered back to life. But they were not alone. A shadowy figure now stood at the entrance, a menacing aura surrounding him. His eyes were a deep crimson, and he wore a sardonic grin. "So we meet again," he said, his voice echoing ominously around the room. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they recognized the voice, the Shadow Weaver, the cliffhanger of their tale. It was him, the one who intended to steal their quest and use the amulet for his nefarious deeds. Their enemy, standing right in front of them. His sudden appearance caused a stir among our heroes. Orion felt his palms become sweaty. His grip on the staff tightened. Grovewalker tensed, ready to spring into action. Kai instinctively reached for his daggers, his eyes never leaving the intruder. Seraph, her heart pounding against her chest, drew her bow, an arrow already nocked. The Shadow Weaver took a step forward, his eyes glinting with malicious intent. "I must commend your persistence," he said. His voice was smooth, but each word was laced with venom. "But I'm afraid your journey ends here." Orion stood his ground, swallowing the lump in his throat. "We won't let you take the amulet," he declared, trying to mask his fear with a determined look. "Oh, I believe you've misunderstood," replied the Shadow Weaver, chuckling under his breath. "I'm not here for the amulet, not yet." He took another step forward, his eyes gleaming. "I'm here for her," he said, pointing at Seraph. A gasp echoed through the room. Seraph's eyes widened, her grip on her bow wavering. She had heard tales of the Shadow Weaver, but she never expected to become a target of his. "What do you want with me?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly. The Shadow Weaver merely smiled, an eerily serene expression on his face. His eyes glowed with an unholy light. "You'll find out soon enough," he said. With that he raised his hand, a dark orb of energy forming in his palm. In the heat of the moment, Kai stepped forward, his daggers at the ready. "Over my dead body," he growled, charging at the enemy. With a flick of his wrist, the Shadow Weaver sent Kai flying backward, crashing into a table. Orion and Grovewalker tried to advance, but a barrier of dark energy repelled them. All they could do was watch in horror as the Shadow Weaver reached out toward Seraph, and then, in a swirl of darkness, they were gone. The room fell silent, the danger over but leaving a gaping void in its wake. The loss of their friend was a blow they had not anticipated. As they collected themselves, Grove Walker's words echoed in the stillness. "This isn't the end. We will bring her back." It was not just a statement. It was a vow, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness that had descended upon them. Their journey had just become much more perilous, but they had also learned a profound lesson. The value of unity and the strength of their bond had never been more apparent. The adversity had brought them closer, solidifying their resolve. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but they were prepared to face it head on. For now, the mission was clear. Save Seraph, stop the Shadow Weaver, secure the amulet, in that order. With a newfound determination they set out, not knowing what awaited them in their pursuit of the enemy. Our heroes found themselves in a maze of dim corridors, the stench of damp stone heavy in the air. They had tracked the Shadow Weaver to this remote castle in the mountains, their minds set on rescuing Seraph. Orion led the group, his staff illuminating the way. His heart pounded against his chest. He remembered the fear in Seraph's eyes when the Shadow Weaver took her, and it fueled his determination. He couldn't let his friend down. Kai walked beside him, his mind filled with regret. He had been too slow, too weak to stop the Shadow Weaver. His mistake had cost them a teammate, a friend. He vowed to make it right, to bring Seraph back. Grove Walker was the last in the formation, his eyes scanning their surroundings. The weight of their mission was heavy on his shoulders. Their journey had been fraught with danger, but nothing compared to the challenge they faced now. Deep within the castle they came upon a colossal door etched with runes. Orion's fingers traced the symbols, his eyes narrowed in concentration. The runes were part of an ancient language, one that he had studied in his years at the academy. "The runes, they form a riddle," he murmured, trying to piece it together. They huddled together, their heads bowed as they focused on the riddle. After what felt like an eternity, Grove Walker's eyes widened with realization. "The answer is time," he said, stepping forward to the center of the door, where a small circular indentation awaited an answer. He whispered the word into the hollow, and like magic, the runes glowed a bright blue before the door creaked open. A large chamber revealed itself, dominated by a raised dais on which stood the Shadow Weaver, Seraph kneeling beside him, a look of despair on her face. But what caught their attention was the massive crystal structure behind them, pulsating with dark energy, the corrupted amulet. Their confrontation with the Shadow Weaver was intense, every blow exchanged filled with a sense of urgency and desperation. But it was during this struggle that the Shadow Weaver unleashed the power of the corrupted amulet. The world spun around them, darkness engulfed the room, and a deep, echoing voice resounded. "The era of shadows has begun." As they strained their eyes through the overwhelming darkness, they noticed the Shadow Weaver was gone. The only thing left on the dais was Seraph, unconscious. Grove Walker rushed to her side, his hand glowing with healing magic. Kai and Orion stood back, their hearts pounding, the weight of the situation sinking in. The Shadow Weaver was gone, the corrupted amulet was activated, and they were left in an era of darkness. Chapter 15 had taught them the power of unity and the strength of their bonds, but it also reminded them of the painful truth. Some battles are lost, and some failures can't be avoided. It's what they choose to do in the aftermath that truly defines them. But with the world now plunged into darkness and their enemy missing, one question echoed in their minds. What's next? Their gazes fell on Seraph, lying unconscious on the dais. Grove Walker's hand was still glowing, his energy channeling into her, but it was taking longer than usual. Her condition was far worse than they had anticipated. Grove Walker's face was pale as he spoke. "The darkness from the amulet has corrupted her. I need more time to heal her." Orion nodded, his mind spinning with thoughts. The corrupted amulet's activation had not just plunged their world into darkness, but also weakened them. The reality of their situation was sinking in. They were in the midst of the era of shadows, with an enemy they couldn't trace, and a friend on the brink of death. Their attention shifted to the massive crystal structure that was now an endless void of darkness. The corrupted amulet had been activated, and its dark energy was spreading like a plague. Kai looked at the amulet, a plan forming in his mind. If they could reverse its power, they might be able to bring back the light. He shared his idea with Orion and Grovewalker. Their gazes fell on Seraph, lying unconscious on the dais. Grovewalker's hand was still glowing, his energy channeling into her. But it was taking longer than usual. Her condition was far worse than they had anticipated. Grovewalker's face was pale as he spoke. "The darkness from the amulet has corrupted her. I need more time to heal her." Orion nodded, his mind spinning with thoughts. The corrupted amulet's activation had not just plunged their world into darkness, but also weakened them. The reality of their situation was sinking in. They were in the midst of the era of shadows, with an enemy they couldn't trace and a friend on the brink of death. Their attention shifted to the massive crystal structure that was now an endless void of darkness. The corrupted amulet had been activated, and its dark energy was spreading like a plague. Kai looked at the amulet, a plan forming in his mind. If they could reverse its power, they might be able to bring back the light. He shared his idea with Orion and Grovewalker. "I can attempt to reverse the amulet's power," he said, determination hardening his features. "But I will need time and protection." Orion gave a curt nod, gripping his staff tighter. "We'll buy you as much time as we can." With that, Kai stepped up to the corrupted amulet. Orion and Grovewalker stood guard, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. The process was laborious, with Kai channeling his energy into the amulet, trying to reverse the flow of dark magic. He could feel the malevolent power pushing back against him, threatening to consume him. But he gritted his teeth, pushing back with all his might. They were in this situation because he wasn't strong enough to protect Seraph, to stop the Shadow Weaver. He had to make things right. As they stood in the chamber, a low growl echoed through the room, sending a shiver down their spines. From the darkness emerged creatures of shadows, their bodies twisting and changing in the gloom. They were the first victims of the era of shadows, now turned into its protectors. Orion and Grovewalker moved in front of Kai, preparing for the onslaught. The shadow creatures charged at them, their roars echoing in the chamber. The battle was fierce and intense, each creature tougher than the last. But with every shadow creature they defeated, two more took its place. It seemed like an endless cycle, but they kept going, driven by their resolve. As they fought, their minds were filled with thoughts of their journey so far, the struggles they faced, the triumphs they celebrated, and the losses they mourned. They thought of the lesson this chapter had taught them. There is strength in unity, and sometimes the battles they lost were just as important as the ones they won. But the question still lingered. What would happen next? How would they overcome the era of shadows? Would Kai be able to reverse the amulet's power, and would they be able to find the Shadow Weaver? In the midst of their dire battle, Grovewalker, struggling to maintain his healing magic on Seraph while warding off the shadow creatures, suddenly froze. His eyes, which were glowing a soothing green, now flickered, mirroring the uncertainty within him. He could feel Seraph's life force diminishing with each passing moment. If he couldn't keep the healing magic constant, they might lose her, but their enemies were closing in, and he had to fight too. Grovewalker closed his eyes, focusing. He knew what he had to do. With a quick, decisive movement, he detached his free hand and thrust it into the ground, calling upon the ancient spirits of the forest. As he uttered an incantation under his breath, the stone floor started to sprout roots and branches that twisted and coiled around the shadow creatures, binding them. With the immediate threat controlled, he turned back to Seraph, his attention now fully focused on her. His hand resumed its soft glow, the green aura radiating brighter than before. The edges of his figure blurred slightly, indicating the immense concentration and energy he was devoting to this single act of healing. Orion, seeing Grovewalker's dedication, was spurred to fight harder. He wove a shield of light around Kai, protecting him from the squirming shadow creatures that were struggling to break free of Grovewalker's binds. His staff throbbed with a radiant light, its power resonating with his determination. Kai, on the other hand, kept his focus steady on the corrupted amulet. His brow furrowed in concentration as he felt the dark energy pushing back, but he held on, pouring all his might into the struggle. The ground beneath them vibrated with the clash of opposing forces. The lights and shadows intertwined, creating a spectacle of a deadly dance. They were fighting against time, against an enemy they didn't fully understand, and against a fate they didn't want. As they pushed against the odds, the stark realization struck them. They had learned a valuable lesson from this ordeal. that one cannot always control the outcomes, but they can control their efforts and dedication. They can choose to fight, to hold on, and to hope. But what came next was something they hadn't anticipated. Suddenly Kai gave out a triumphant cry, a brilliant white light emanating from the amulet. The light cut through the darkness, spreading out in all directions. The shadow creatures shrieked, the light disintegrating them instantly. But the light didn't stop there. It seemed to cut through the darkness outside the chamber, illuminating the whole area. However, as quickly as the light appeared, it faded, leaving them in semi-darkness. The chamber was quiet, save for their heavy breathing. Kai slumped, exhausted but victorious. He had managed to reverse the amulet's power, but it had taken a toll on him. Orion and Grovewalker rushed to him, helping him up. They shared a brief moment of celebration, but as they turned to look at Seraph, they found her still unconscious, her condition unimproved. Their celebration was short-lived. Suddenly a chilling laugh echoed through the chamber, freezing them in place. From the shadows emerged the figure they had been seeking, the Shadow Weaver. His eyes glowed a menacing red. A dark grin spread across his face. "It's not over yet," he hissed, his voice echoing ominously in the chamber, before vanishing back into the shadows, leaving them in stunned silence. Orion, Grovewalker, and Kai stared at the spot where the Shadow Weaver had vanished, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and fury. The haunting echo of his chilling laughter still hung in the air, sending shivers down their spines. But they couldn't afford to waste any more time. They had to move, now. Turning their attention back to Seraph, Grovewalker and Orion hurried to her side. Grovewalker resumed his healing magic, his green aura wrapping around her like a protective cocoon. He was determined not to let her life force slip away. On the other hand, Orion, with a worried expression etched on his face, kept a lookout for any more shadow creatures. His fingers were tightly wrapped around his staff, ready to launch an attack at the first sign of threat. The silence in the chamber was deafening, amplifying the tension that hung in the air. Meanwhile, Kai was still struggling to recover his strength. Reversing the amulet's power had drained him physically and mentally. His fingers trembled as he clutched the amulet, its glow now faint but still warm. He knew they had to destroy it, once and for all, to stop the Shadow Weaver. A sudden flicker of movement at the corner of the room caught Orion's attention. Without a second thought, he spun around, his staff emitting a bright light, ready to ward off any enemy. But to his surprise, he saw a small creature scurrying towards them. It was a little forest sprite, a benign spirit of nature known to Grovewalker. It had a tiny, fluttering body surrounded by a soft glow. But what caught Orion's attention was the object it was carrying, a small crystal. The sprite hovered in front of Grovewalker, dropping the crystal into his outstretched hand before disappearing back into the shadows. Grovewalker looked at the crystal, a spark of recognition in his eyes. "It's a life crystal," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "These contain powerful healing properties." A glimmer of hope ignited in their hearts. This could be the breakthrough they needed to save Seraph. Grovewalker carefully placed the life crystal over Seraph's chest, uttering an incantation. The crystal started glowing a bright green, harmonizing with Grovewalker's healing magic. Seraph's body absorbed the glow, her pallor gradually replaced by a healthy color. The lesson they had learned earlier became even more profound. Life in all its forms and manifestations is interconnected. One could not exist without the other, and the life crystal was a testament to this fact. The forest had given them a part of its life essence to save Seraph, reminding them of the value and power of unity and symbiosis. But the moment of respite was short-lived. As the life crystal's glow dimmed, the chamber's walls started to shake. Dust and small pebbles fell from the ceiling as a thunderous voice echoed through the chamber. "You cannot escape your destiny." The Shadow Weaver's voice was filled with wrath. "This is just the beginning." With that ominous warning, the chamber's floor cracked open, swallowing them into the darkness below. As they plunged into the abyss, their screams echoing through the pitch darkness, a strange calmness fell over them. This was not the end. They knew it in their hearts. They had faced death multiple times, stared it right in the eye, and each time they had come out stronger, more resilient. This was just another test, another challenge they had to overcome. The darkness gave way to a soft light as they landed on a bed of leaves. Groaning, they got up, dusting off their clothes. The soft glow emanated from bioluminescent plants, lining the cavernous room they found themselves in. It was an underground forest, untouched and preserved, its existence unbeknownst to the world above. With a groan, Kai pushed himself up, his body protesting at the sudden movement. He winced as he stretched his legs, pulling a face at the uncomfortable tingling sensation, but he was alive, and that was all that mattered. "Is everyone all right?" Orion asked, helping Seraph to her feet. Grovewalker, despite his own injuries, was already tending to the few cuts and bruises they had sustained during the fall. They nodded, grimacing as they assessed their situation. With a sigh of relief, Grovewalker turned to the rest of them. "We're lucky. The fall could have been much worse." Orion nodded, gripping his staff tighter. He knew they were on borrowed time. The Shadow Weaver was relentless, and it was only a matter of time before he found them. But for now, they had to focus on recuperating and formulating a new plan. As they took a moment to catch their breath, the profound lesson from before echoed in their minds. The world worked in mysterious ways, always keeping them on their toes. Just as they thought they had the upper hand, life would throw a curveball, reminding them of their mortality and the unpredictability of their journey. "But we're not giving up," Orion said, breaking the silence. "We've come too far to let the Shadow Weaver win." His words echoed in the silent cavern, reverberating off the moss-covered walls, imbuing them with a newfound determination. However, the peaceful silence was shattered by a chilling laugh echoing through the cavern. Their hearts sank as the familiar menacing voice filled the air, sending shivers down their spines. "You can't hide forever," the Shadow Weaver's voice echoed. "Your end is inevitable." We've now come to the end of this chapter. Please stay tuned for the next chapter of this story to be published in the upcoming days.